Welcome to another episode of Storied. Today we want to broaden the conversation and get more of a diverse perspective through an intersectional dialogue. Today I am welcoming Leah Rosenblum to the conversation. Welcome.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about yourself.
My name's Leah. My background is in social work and humanitarian work. Most of the stuff that I've done in my life has really been surrounding youth and teenagers. And all of my different experiences are very diverse, but they all share one thing in common, and that really is that they all intend to take people out of their comfort zones and to unite them with people from all walks of life, to bring people who are very different together and to see past, their outer appearances, their colors, their religions, their backgrounds, and to really connect on a human level. So now I work for GlobeKick, an international travel company that does really the same thing but for adults. And really it's just intended to, my biggest passion in life is really to just help people connect beyond what separates us.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. I want to have a discussion about one of my favorite quotes. It's by Shirley MacLaine in her book, and she says, "The more I travel, the more I realize that fear makes strangers of people that should be friends." What are your thoughts on that?
So I love that quote. You had sent it to me yesterday, and I thought a lot about it. And really what came to mind first of all was the word fear. One of my biggest teachers in my life says that the word fear stands for false evidence appearing real. And so what that does is it separates us and it puts a judgment on the other, right, on the unknown. And so the thing about judgment, we've talked about this, is it's not really a bad thing. It's evolutionarily, it's useful, right? It's the way that our brain tells our body, like, that's harmful, that's not, that's something to be afraid of, that's not. And we talked this morning, I think a really funny anecdote or illustration of that is, like, you wouldn't ask a 2-year-old for directions, right? Right. You wouldn't ask a 90-year-old woman to help you move a couch. Yeah. That's your brain making, assessments, exactly. The problem with judgment is really when we attach ourselves to that first thought. That first thought is inherent, right? It's based on our families, our friends, our experiences, our towns, the political climate, media. That's not our fault necessarily. That's inherent. But what is our responsibility is our second thought and our third thought, and the actions that we attach to our thoughts. So I love that quote. I think that global travel and taking yourself out of your comfort zone, making yourself vulnerable, and bringing yourself face to face with the other or what you were, necessarily afraid of or maybe unsure about is the quickest way to step beyond that. Yeah,
you've talked a lot with us about Brené Brown, and there's a lot of power and vulnerability, and I think for me, travel is one of those spaces where you're at your most vulnerable. You really don't have a choice. You're meeting new people, the language is different. You want to make friends, you're not sure how, so you kind of just have to step out. Totally. And once you do that, you realize we're a lot more similar than we are dissimilar. And the things that make us different are just as beautiful, but it's nice to know that you can connect to someone in a very human level.
Totally. And that's the thing about travel, right? It's a catalyst, it's a tool. It takes you out of your comfort zone, and all of a sudden you're vulnerable. And, opening the door to your apartment is new, or riding the elevator is, a challenge. Getting a cup of coffee, things that we take for granted in our daily lives back home, all of a sudden you have to, get curious about again. And so global travel, putting yourself into a new environment where you're the foreigner, it changes, it brings you into a place of curiosity versus certainty. All of a sudden, everything that you might have thought to be true is contested and it's put to a test, right? It also requires compassion. All of a sudden, you might need help and you're relying on locals. And then, maybe when you're back home in your own space, you're like, wow, remember that time when I needed support and I felt, uncomfortable, insecure, foreign. So I don't know that inherently going to a new place and being a tourist is necessarily what's transformational. It's really the act of being vulnerable, and it's the act of being new, and the act of being insecure, and all these human qualities that come out of us when we're in a situation that we're not used to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this partnership is a good example, because I imagine all the people I've met through GlobeKick, which I'm a part of, and I wonder if we had been in a different setting, would we be able to connect in this way, right? Because people are not as proactive or as comfortable reaching out to someone that is different or the other, right? But now we're in this space and we're seeing that maybe we have burgeoning friendships we would never have seen them before. And you mentioned transformation and want to talk a little bit about that. How do you see travel as a tool for transformation? Talk to me a little about GlobeKick and the vision for that and what it's trying to do for our generation.
Yeah. So the first thing, the transformational aspect of it, we make assumptions about everybody, like we just talked about. And that's not necessarily bad. Of course, we just spoke about that. But when you step into a new space, you have these ideas on like how certain groups of people are, Africans are this way, Mexicans are this way, whatever. And you get to a space, I can think of a really loud experience for me. When I was in Kenya, I met a young Rwandan girl who had never been on an escalator before. And she was in Kenya and she was so, everything there was so new for her. And I'm like, oh, but you're Rwandan, it's right next door. But that didn't matter. Even within this continent, there's so much diversity, of course. That seems obvious when you say it out loud, but really, like, we carry these inherent ideas about the world, right? And so when you step out of that with curiosity, with a thirst for growth and for knowledge and for change in your own perspective, you start to see things that you may not have seen taking the same, drive to work every day.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, it's really just stepping out of what you know to be true and to be a student again. And something I think is really funny, one of my really good friends, who's actually on GlobeKick this last trip, was telling me a story of how when he went to Vietnam, he said, Leah, do you know what they call the Vietnam War in Vietnam? The American War. And it's just so, it's just that little, illustration of like, it's the Vietnam War, of course. That's what we learn. That's how we refer to it.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the world, that's not how it is. It doesn't make it wrong, and it doesn't make our truth any less true. It's just a really beautiful way to be like, okay, I'm a little bit wrong about everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, two takeaways. One, perspective is key, right? Because on one end, we're seeing it very differently than someone else. And so it almost depends on where you're standing.
Exactly.
And then two, the way you describe like how it can be a tool for transformation, it sounds like that first step, you're almost already doing most of the work, right? Because you've decided, I am going to actively take myself out of a safe space and do something different.
And learn to trust and to breathe and to find compassion for me and for others and to really connect, on people's humanity beyond everything else, right? So I think that's what GlobeKick's trying to do, and that's what I'm trying to do is just, in my life. I think one of my favorite anecdotes is I work with teenagers, like I've said, and I was with a group of Kenyan young girls, teenage girls from all over. Well, they weren't all Kenyan. Some were American, some were Rwandan, some were Kenyan. I had one girl I was working with who was Somali, and they were all very different, and they were coming from a lot of conflicting tribes. Tribal conflict is really large. It's a really big problem in Kenya. And when we would get into our cabin at the end of the night, we would take off, all of our stuff and sit in the middle of the room. All they really wanted to talk about was which boys they thought were cute. And it just was so beautiful. It's like, it doesn't matter where you come from or, at the end of the day, like, we're all human.
Yeah.
And so this, travel is an opportunity to discover that. And GlobeKick is that in so many layers. For me, that's my biggest intention is to just get people, to be their best selves. And I feel like in community of willing individuals, you get an opportunity to be your best self. And then the other side of it is this whole transformation in the work industry, right?
Yeah.
That, just our generation, I think the statistic is something like every 2 years, every 26 months, our generation is switching careers. And it's because we're not meant to be sitting in a desk from the hours of 9 to 5 every single day. Topping away, literally shutting down, and disconnecting from each other. Technology has done this thing where it's like, you sit in a train and you look around and everyone's on their phone, right? And I'm like, but it's pulling you out of the moment and it's taking you away from the nourishment of what like this has to offer right here and the person in front of you. So, I think GlobeKick's intention is multi-layered, but for me, that's the biggest, most beautiful part of this program is, and this experience is really just watching these unlikely relationships form.
Yeah, and blossom.
Yeah, totally.
So you talked a little bit about Kenya and some of the work you've done there, and I really love the story of the girls just kind of going in the cabin and then they're talking about boys. It's funny because that doesn't change culturally, age,
Totally.
it just, that's what it was down
Yeah,
to.
totally.
Tell me about your missionary and philanthropic work.
So I have been doing service work since I was probably 5 or 6. My mom it was a really big part of her life, and my sister and I both, we've just grown up always serving. And when I was in high school, I was a president of my service club for 4 years, and then when I got my master's in social work. And then I moved to Austin, Texas, and I started working for an organization called the Amala Foundation, which has changed my life in so many ways, and probably one of the main reasons I am the way that I am. And we work with teenagers from all walks of life and host an experience called the Global Youth Peace Summit. It unites 75 youth from over 35 countries for 8 days. And the idea is exactly what we've been talking about. It's to put a face and to put a heart and to put a soul to Iraq, to put a soul to Palestine, to put a soul to Kenya and the Congo. And all of these these teenagers are growing up in this intense age of media of like, this is how it is and this is how these people are. And when we get them together for 8 days and we focus on like their humanity and finding peace here, something really beautiful happens. And so my role with that actually was to lead the adults. So I was the volunteer coordinator, which was a really interesting dynamic because, we would say to them all the time, like, you're not here to teach, you're here to learn, right? And so by you starting here and finding peace within your own being and a willingness to grow and to learn, a natural catalyst, a natural alchemy occurs where the youth are served. Because the youth are able to witness adults just being real.
Yeah.
And they don't necessarily get to see that all the time. So I think that service work, speaking on that, the volunteer role, is just the quickest way to growth. You get mirrored when you're serving others. All of your own stuff comes up, and then you get to kind of watch that, right? And I just think that when you step out of your own being, your own life, with intention of helping your neighbor, regardless of what they look like, some magic happens, right?
Yeah.
So.
I was really stuck on your first point on, the media saying this is what it means to be Pakistani or, Arab in general. And it just dawned on me, we spend so much time defining who other people are, spend a lot less time defining like who we are. And you're giving people a space for that, which is amazing. That's interesting. And it's like, it's corny, right? The be the change you wish to see in the world. Yeah. But it's really the truth. I spent so much time of my life like preaching and being like, be this way. And then the second I turned that inward and was just like, no, just you authentically be that way. It was this natural alchemy, right? Where people were seeing that, and my vulnerability gave permission to somebody else to be vulnerable. And it gave permission to somebody else to just be their authentic self and all their messiness and all of their beauty, no matter what it looked like. It's like, just be you, and like fully in your human experience. And that's where we can connect on. Yeah. Yeah. Have you been able to see in your time doing that type of work, like the real impact and the impact of it on the people and their experience and how you see them like change and transform? Is that something that you're witness to?
Oh yeah. First of all, my biggest teachers in this world are teens.
Yeah.
They are unbelievable and not given nearly enough credit. So that's the first and foremost. I see, some kids show up literally like physically, I'm also a yoga teacher, so I pay a lot of attention to the energetics of that, physically closed off, and rightfully so. They've been hurt in a lot of ways, and they've been told by the entire world, like, you're not good enough, you need to be this, all this pressure that we put on our youth to be all of these different things, and they're just figuring it out, right? And then at age 18, you're like, so what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, figure it out now, choose right now. And they're like, well, but you didn't give me any context to figure out who I am. There's no, development work as youth in our country to figure out who you are, the essence of you. You're never asked that question.
Such a true point.
And so, I watch them after 8 days of just like being celebrated in all of their humanity, like actually stand taller. It's really incredible. I know it sounds like a little woo-woo, but it really is. It's unbelievable to witness and to watch these unlikely relationships form and continue on, and watch these youth go on to do the most amazing things imaginable, starting their own businesses, their own nonprofits, their own, just taking leadership in their own lives nothing fills me more.
Yeah,
So
that's beautiful. I think we need more of it.
100%.
And not just with the young people. I think we can create those spaces, from the youngest to the oldest. We just have to be willing to put ourselves out there and do it. So, I prefaced the conversation by saying this is an intersectional dialogue. The work that I've done for Storied has been, primarily women of color. But I realize, and we've talked about this, that for us to progress and get somewhere, we have to open it and broaden it and get different perspectives. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, have a conversation about, is how do we, as people that are different, as women that are different, not just race, but culture, background, history, beliefs, biases, values, how do we partner to be catalysts of change? Like, how can I leverage you and your talents and your vision and everything that inspires you, and how can you do the same with me to really make stuff happen?
So here's the deal with that. Like, it's just not easy. It's not natural to us. We stay in what's comfortable, like we've been speaking about. And so the first thing is we have to have the hard conversations. We have to. We have to figure out the words that work for each other. So, for example, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How do you like to be referred in your color?
It's a good question. Black is how I identify, and if we're talking culturally, Afro-Latina, Afro-Caribbean, and Puerto Rican.
Awesome. Thank you for telling me that.
You're welcome.
So that's what I mean. Like that, even my heart like beats when I ask you that, right? Because I'm like, we've been taught to be ashamed and to not ask each other those questions, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to have the hard conversations. I have this beautiful black unicorn of a woman, that's how she refers to herself, in my life, named Tasha, and she has been the largest catalyst for this conversation for me. She's just given me exactly what we're saying for these youth, and for, even in this context in GlobeKick, a really safe space to ask questions. And I'm like, okay. And through that process, I've realized, like, being ashamed for being in my skin color is not useful and it's not productive.
No. Yeah.
But it's also not your job to make me feel better about that. Right? So I have to take ownership of, like, okay, this is my role in the world. How do I leverage that? And how do I rock it the best that I can with the most integrity, right? So I think the first thing is definitely have hard conversations and ask questions. Come at those conversations with curiosity. Be brave enough to be like, okay, well, how do you want to be referred, so that I don't just completely disregard it, and also that I don't offend you. And then the second thing, I think, I wrote 4 things down. The first thing is have the hard conversations. And then the second thing is compassion and empathy. So we talked about Brene Brown. If y'all don't know her, she's my social work hero. She's amazing. This amazing woman from Houston. And she did this awesome video on empathy. And she talks about how empathy fuels connection, sympathy drives disconnection. And it's the idea that, it was this beautiful cartoon, that if you are in this hole, right, of your own perspective, for somebody to climb down there and be like, what would it be like down here? Let me look around. Versus looking down and being like, that would be interesting, right? And she says that when you choose empathy over sympathy, it's a very vulnerable choice, because it requires you to tap into a place in your own being of what that would be like. So the second thing is, when you're coming in a conversation with somebody that's different than you, coming with empathy, coming with this ability to be like, what would that be like for me? Instead of like, let me assume or project on, and feel bad for anything that you've gone through in your life or that I've gone through. The third thing is connecting on the things that make us the same. I loved how you said to me, someone had asked you why your hair looks different from day to day, and you said, I put heat on it. Just like
so
you.
Simple.
Right, just like you. And I was thinking about that, and I'm like, isn't it annoying when you like spend hours doing your hair and then it rains and it's like curly again? And it's like, you get that, I get that. Like, we're women. like we have heartbeats, we breathe the same.
There's commonality.
Yeah, so the third thing is connecting on those so that we can like create sisterhood and allyship. And then that's the fourth thing is allyship. So my friend Tasha that I had referred to, you know, we'd have these beautiful conversations much like this, and then I would go home and live my life and not think about it. And I had this moment one day where I was like, she doesn't get to do that. Like she goes home and her skin's the same every day. So it's a reality for her, this conversation that we're having that I leave here on this couch, right? And so allyship means like, I don't let that go ever. That this conversation I carry with me, and that your being in your walk I carry with me as if it's my own. And that these conversations need to be had all the time, that I have to stand up and have them, regardless if, you know, I'm in a social setting and don't want to be a buzzkill or whatever. Like I have to be an ally because we're sisters, and that's the only way to break through this separation is to walk together.
Yeah.
So
I was reading something yesterday and an article, and the tagline or the heading title was that we don't need more allies, we need co-conspirators. And I thought that was an interesting slant, because I think that's what you're speaking to.
Yeah.
This idea of, you know, I'll walk alongside you, I'll, you know, kind of like wave at a distance versus like I'll sit with you
Awesome.
and we'll figure it out together.
See,
which is
and
a
like
whole
that
other
will
level.
change my language now. Like this conversation will now change my language.
Yeah.
And that's the idea, right? Is to come in curious and be like, I'm a little wrong about everything. So what a beautiful like insight and reflection of co-conspirator.
Co-conspirators.
Cool.
We'll be co-conspirators.
Yeah, for sure.
So if someone were to ask you, which I will ask you,
Yeah.
how do I get more involved? How do I do what you did and, you know, try to change the world? How I get outside my comfort zone, transform? How do I become a co-conspirator? Like, what would be your piece of advice of like, here's what you can do for yourself to get to this space?
So I'm really big on, first of all, getting to know yourself. I mean, journal, whatever you got to do to figure out what lights your own soul on fire, right? Because that's what you got to take into anything that you're going to do in the world. So first of all, like, spend time here. And then secondly, I'm huge on what I like to call informational interviews. So people that you admire, people that you respect, or even people that you may not know much about and may be fearful of, sit down, ask questions. Even if you need to come up with a template and you need to preface it as like, I just am trying to be better and I'm trying to learn and to grow, like, would you mind having a conversation with me? You would be blown away by how many people are willing to go there. And then, you know, Google is your best friend. Whatever city you're in, like, Google what's going on in that city, the issues that are relevant, and how you can get involved. I think sometimes the world feels so big and so intense, especially right now, that part of me, and I think part of a lot of people are like, oh, I just can't even. I'm just going to like live my life, go to my grocery stores, go to my 5 places, go to my job, spend time with my own friends, because it's just too much. And so it doesn't have to be a big thing where you quit your job and you start working, you know, for a small grassroots nonprofit and you don't make any, like, it doesn't have to be that. It's just coming with this new perspective of curiosity to everything that you do and to every person that you meet. And like I heard you say this morning, you know, even if people can take away one thing from my interaction with them or my conversation, then that is changing the world. It really, I mean, it sounds lofty and it sounds, I don't know how it sounds, but for me, I've seen the proof of it, of like just starting with one conversation and being so fully present and so fully just coming at everything with love, genuine love. It ripples and it changes that person's day, that person's moment, and then the people that they interact with, so on and so forth. Yeah,
that was one of my big takeaways from our discussion earlier, that incremental changes matter. And if it is so much that you say to yourself, I am going to work from love or be open or engage, and you have that mindset shift, it'll empower other people to do the same, and you'll see that momentum continue to grow and flourish.
Right, and you know, I'm no one to tell people not to be angry, and in fact, I think anger can be a really useful emotion. You know, what's happened in the world and what is happening currently is enough to be very, very angry about. All I'm saying is that we need to connect on our pain versus use it as a deconnect. Like, we need to be together in that, and your pain be my pain and my pain be your pain, so that we can then use it as a tool, use it as fuel to make differences, instead of being like, oh, well, she wouldn't understand.
Right.
She's never been in my shoes.
Yeah. So this conversation is a good start.
Yeah. You're already doing it. That answer was for other people.
I love it.
Yeah.
This was great.
Yeah.
This was beautiful. Thank you for your time.
Having me.
You're
It's
welcome.
An absolute honor.
Thank you for joining this episode
Thank
of
you.
Storied. Check us out on social media at StoriedSeries.com. It's actually not StoriedSeries.com. I made that up. One more time. Thank you for joining this episode of Storied. Check us out on social media at Storied Series. What do you think?
It's sad.